Hello everyone and welcome to the chapter number 32 of Blender Master Course Geometry Nodes Creating Fence. In this chapter we'll be understanding all these topics in complete detail and we'll be using these topics to create this fence. And our target for the upcoming videos will be to create a landscape with this fence, some grass and rocks. But for today's chapter we'll focus only on creating this fence. And yes, if you are new to this course then do check out the previous 32 chapters from the link of the playlist in the pinned comment. Now the first topic for today's chapter is understanding the resample curve node. But before that, let's first open the Geometry Nodes editor, and now instead of working on this cube, we'll be adding a Bezier curve. So press X to delete it, press Shift plus A, go to curve and add the Bezier curve. Now we'll be using this curve to make the fence. So first let's go to the top view by pressing 7 on the numpad. Let's zoom in, and if I enter the edit mode of this curve by pressing the tab key, then here you will notice that we have a tool called draw. And if I select this, then I can draw the curve just by left clicking and dragging like this. And this is going to be very useful while we are creating the fence. Right now let's undo. Now to start working on the geometry nodes, first let's enter the object mode by pressing the tab key and take on the new button. Now we'll be adding the resample curve by pressing Shift plus A. In the curve, we'll go to operations and here we have the resample curve. Let's place it here. And yes, one more important thing is that you do not need to memorize the location of each and every node in this add menu. You can simply search for the specific node from the search bar here. For example, if I type object info, then you will get the object info node here. Similarly, you can search for any other node and easily add it in the geometry nodes editor. Now we'll understand this resample curve node in a little while, but before that, let's also add the instance on points. So press Shift plus A, go to instances and select the instance on points. Let's place it before the output, and we learnt about this node in the previous chapter of this course. Now we'll also need an instance object here, and for this we'll be using a simple cube. So press Shift plus A, go to mesh, and in the primitives select cube. Let's place it here and connect it to the instance, and we notice some changes here. But before understanding that, let's reduce the scale of these cubes from here. Suppose I change it to 0.2 or maybe 0.1, and now we can view them properly. Now let's come back to the resample curve node. If I tab into the edit mode, you will notice that our curve is still present here and it has 2 points. One is this point and the other one is this point. And also whenever you select one of the points, this handle will appear, and this middle point is known as the control point of the curve. By pressing G, I can move the curve like this. Now to understand the working of this node, I'll first remove it from here by holding Alt, and if I left click, it will get removed. Now without using this resample curve node, we observe that we have 2 cubes placed only at the vertices or the center points of this curve, and that's because the instance on points node is connected here. It will place the instance, which is the cube in this case, to the points of the curve. And then if I select the resample curve and place it here, it basically creates more of these points throughout the curve, which can be controlled from the count number here. Previously I showed you that without using this node, you had only 2 instances or the cubes added at the center points. But right now the count value here is set to 10, and as a result, we are having 10 cubes placed at different points on this curve. And also if I press G to move this point and extend it like this, you will notice that the number of these cubes will still remain the same. Only the length of this curve will change, but not the number of these cubes. And that is because the mode here is set to count. But if I change it to length, then basically this length value will control the distance between 2 instances or 2 cubes. So if I increase the distance, the number of cubes will reduce. That's because within the same length of the curve, the increase in the distance between 2 cubes will result in lesser space for the other cubes. As a result, the number of these cubes will reduce. But if I press G to move it, you will notice that as the length increases, the number of these cubes will also increase. And this is the use of the length mode in the resample curve. And now the third option that you have here is the evaluated. And if I select the evaluated mode, basically it allows you to control the number of these cubes by going to the object data properties and changing the resolution from here. Higher the resolution, more will be the number of cubes, and lesser the resolution, lesser will be the number of cubes. And this is how the evaluated mode works in resample curve node. Now suppose you want that instead of the cubes here, you should have the monkey or the Suzanne model. But if I go to the geometry nodes editor, press Shift plus A, in the mesh primitives, you will find that you don't have the option of selecting the Suzanne model. To fix this problem, we have the object info node. So suppose I delete this cube by pressing X. Let's come out of the edit mode, press Shift plus A to add a monkey, go to mesh and select the monkey. Let's place it in the Y direction by pressing G and Y and move it here. To select the curve again, go to the scene collection and select the Bezier curve. Now to assign the monkey to the instance, we'll use the object info node. So press Shift plus A, go to input, and in scene, you will find the object info node. Let's place it here, and this node is basically used to input any particular object from the scene in the geometry nodes editor. For example, if I click on the object here and select the Suzanne, and then if I connect the geometry to the instance, you will notice that just like the cubes, now we are having these monkey objects placed at different points in the curve. You can reduce their number from the resolution preview here because we have enabled the evaluated mode in the resample curve. Now there's also an easy way to add the object info node, which is to go to the scene collection, and suppose I need the Suzanne model, so I'll drag it by left clicking and drop it in the geometry nodes editor. And now we have the object info node added with the Suzanne selected. Now in a very similar way, we can create a fence, but for that we'll first add a cube in our scene. So press Shift plus A, go to mesh and add a cube, tab into the edit mode, and we'll be making one part of the fence. So let's scale it down in the X and Y axis by pressing S and X and scale it down like this. Similarly in the Y axis, press S and Y and scale it down like this. Now go to the front view by pressing 1 on the numpad. Let's also move it upwards by pressing G and Z, and let's place it here. Now to create the remaining part of the fence, I will create a duplicate by pressing Shift plus D and right click to cancel the movement. And let's rotate it in the Y axis by 90 degrees. So press R, Y and 90. Enter to confirm, and we'll place it here. Left click to finalize the position, and this is how this part of the fence is looking right now. Let's also scale this down in the Y axis by pressing S and Y and scale it down like this. Let's also create a duplicate of this part and move it downwards. So press Shift plus D, right click, press G and Z to move it downwards. Let's place it here, and now the part of a fence is ready, and we'll be using this part to create the entire fence. For this, select the Bezier curve. I will delete this object info node by pressing X, and here in this object info node, I'll change the object from the Suzanne to cube. Now you can see here that the fence is somewhat visible, but it's not perfect, and that's because we have to change the scale value of this fence. So I'll go to the scale value here, and let's increase it by left clicking and dragging like this, and if I move my cursor, then the scale will increase or reduce. And right now, the increments with which the scale is changing is very high. And to fix this problem, hold on the Shift key, and now if I scale it up and down, we get smaller increments. And I think that a value of somewhere near 0.2 would look fine, because at this value, all the parts of the fence seems to connect with each other. But another problem that you can see here is that the rotation of this fence is not right. It's not aligned to the rotation and the structure of the curve. And to fix this, we'll be using another node, which is the Align Euler to Vector node. To add it here, press Shift plus A, go to Utilities, and in the rotation, select Align Euler to Vector. Let's place it here. Now I don't know if the pronunciation of this word is right or not. I am pronouncing it as Euler, but a lot of people also pronounce it as Euler, so you can search for the pronunciation of this word if it's Euler or Euler or something else. Now the use of this node is that it basically helps to align the rotation in the X, Y and Z axis as per the vector values here. So if I connect the rotation of this Align Euler to Vector to the rotation here, you will notice some changes here. Basically, the X axis is selected here, meaning that it will align the X axis as per the vector values here. And here you can see that the vector value in the Z axis is set to 1. As a result, the rotation that you were seeing previously is now aligned like this in the Z axis. Similarly, you can change the axis to align from here. For example, if I select Y, then they will get aligned like this. Similarly, the Z axis, and it looks like this. It won't show you any change in the Z axis because aligning the Z axis to the vector will mean that you are aligning the same axis in the same direction of the vector, as the value of Z in vector is set to 1. Now if you're understanding it for the very first time, it might be possible that you can't understand it completely, but in simple words, it basically aligns a particular axis according to the vector values that you are having here. Now to rotate this fence along the curve, we have to add another node, which is the curve tangent node. So press Shift plus A, go to curve, and in read, select the curve tangent. Let's place it here, and now I'll go to the top view by pressing 7 on the numpad. Then I'll take this tangent socket and connect it to the vector, and to get them properly aligned with the curve, change the axis from here. At X axis it looks fine, and you can see here that there are still some imperfections in this model. And to fix this, we'll first reduce the scaling in the X axis so that the fence part will just touch each other. Then to increase their count, I'll go to the resample curve, change the mode from evaluated to count, and if I increase it, you will notice that the fence will now look perfect. In fact, let me show you one more thing. If I go to the top view by pressing 7 on the numpad, tab into the edit mode, and with this draw option selected, if I left click and draw a curve, you will notice that a fence will get created that will be perfectly aligned with the structure of that curve. And that's how you can simply create any fence just by drawing a curve. So if I go to the top view again, we can draw 3 to 4 curves like this. But one thing to notice here is that as I increase the length of the curves, the number of these instances will remain the same. And if I go to the count and try to increase them, you will notice that the number of instances in the smaller as well as the bigger fence will increase. And so we'll try a better approach, which is to change the mode from count to length. And now we can set a particular length which will be the minimum distance between two instances. So if I reduce it, you will notice that the distance between the two instances will reduce, close, and at a particular value, they will get connected to each other and make a perfect fence. And now let's move ahead to the next topic of this chapter, which is the delete geometry node. And this node is basically used to delete some random parts of your mesh, and to explore it in detail, we'll add it in the geometry node editor. So press Shift plus A, go to geometry, and in the operations, select delete geometry. Let's place it here. Now here you can see that in the domain you have some options, which means that in any mesh or the object that you select, you can delete the points, the edges, the faces, the spline or basically the curves, and even the instances. And from here you can select the mode of deleting, meaning that if you want to delete only the edges and faces, or if you want to delete only the faces. And now to see how it works, we'll take it and drop in between the resample curve and the instance on points. And here we observe that it deletes everything. And that's because we have not given any information to the delete geometry node about which part of mesh it should delete. And suppose you want to delete some random parts. For this we'll add the random value node by pressing Shift plus A, go into utilities, and here we have the random value. So I'll select this and place it here. Now here you have some options in the data type like float, integer, vector and boolean. The data type will basically define the output that it will generate. For example, with the float selected, it will basically give the output between the minimum and the maximum values, that is 0 and 1, and the output will be a float value or a decimal value. Similarly, you have integers, vectors, but we'll be selecting the boolean. And for those of you who don't know what a boolean is, it basically means true or false. In fact, here you can see that you have this probability bar which is set to 0.5. To discover how it works, we'll take this value socket and connect it to the selection, and here you can see that now some random parts of the fence are deleted here. See, the function of delete geometry is simply to delete the mesh or any part of the mesh, but if we don't give any information to it about which part to delete, it will delete everything. Therefore, we needed to add the random value node with the boolean selected, and this probability option will basically define the probability or the chances of each part of the fence getting deleted. Since the probability is set to 0.5, it means that the chances of each fence to get deleted is 50-50. And if you want more part of the fence to be deleted, you can increase the probability from here. And now you can see here that as I increase the probability, the part of the mesh which is getting disappeared will increase. But to create a realistic looking fence, we lower the probability to somewhere around 0.2 or 0.1. Then you have this seed option here, and if I change it, you will notice that it generates a completely different output. So you can use this seed value to generate some random outputs with the same probability value. But I think that I will change it to this seed value as it looks better right now. So you can try to change the probability value from here and also the seed value to get some different results each and every time. And I think that this output looks perfect, so I'll finalize this one. And now moving ahead, let's give this fence some basic material. For this, I will change this spreadsheet into the shader editor by clicking on this icon and selecting the shader editor. Press N to close this toolbar and click on new button. Here we have the default material applied to the fence. Let's go to the material preview mode or maybe the rendered preview mode, and we should increase the lighting in our scene. So I will select the lamp here, and in the properties, I'll change the type of light to sun. Let's reduce the strength from here to something like 10 or maybe 20. Let's also rotate it in the X axis by pressing R and X, and let's rotate it like this. And now we have a better lighting in the scene, but right now I think that the strength is too high, so I will reduce the strength slightly and I'll keep it to somewhere near 10, and it looks perfect. So I'll again select the fence and let's create the material. We'll be creating a basic wood material to apply to this fence, so let's rename the material to wood. And yes, if you have not learned about the material textures and nodes, then you can check the previous chapters of this course where we understood about the node components, the basic and procedural shaders, image textures and a lot more. But for now, we'll be creating a simple wood texture by adding a noise texture here. So press Shift plus A, go to texture and add the noise texture. Let's place it over here. Press Ctrl plus T to get the input and the mapping node. This shortcut will work only if the node wrangler add-on is turned on. Then connect this object socket of the texture coordinate to this vector socket, and to view the texture here, press Ctrl plus Shift and left click on the noise texture. But here we need to zoom in to view the texture on this fence. Now the reason why we can't see anything here is that we have applied this material to the Bezier curve, but instead of that, we should have applied this material to this fence object. To do this, in the material properties, click on this icon and select wood, and now if I zoom in, you will observe that the noise texture is visible on the fence here. Now to make a realistic wood texture, we'll change the value of the scale from the noise texture. And yes, before that, we'll be viewing the texture on this object because it's comparatively bigger in size, and so the texture will be properly visible. Now we'll go to the noise texture, increase the scale value like this, and let's increase it to something like maybe 50, and let's also increase the detailing. And you might have seen that the wood material has this stretching effect on its surface, and to achieve this kind of result in Blender, we'll go to the scaling in the mapping vector node, and let's try to change these values in different axes. And if I increase the scale in the X axis and zoom in, you will notice that we are getting some kind of stretching effect, but it's not perfect right now. To fix this, we'll take this UV socket and connect it to the vector, tab into the edit mode, press A to select all, then in the UV option here, here, select Smart UV Project, click OK, and now if I go to the object mode again and try to change the values of scale, from here you will notice that by scaling it in the y-axis, it gives us a better texture. To view it properly, I'll go to the front view by pressing 1 on the numpad and let's zoom in like this. So here you can see that with the scaling in the x-axis set to 1, if I increase the scaling in the y-axis, we get this stretching effect on the texture. So we'll finalize the texture and now it looks like this. And now to give some color to it, we'll add the color ramp. So press Shift plus A, go to converter and select the color ramp. Let's place it here and I'll select the first pointer and change its color from here. Let's increase the brightness slightly and I'll change it to brown color. You can check the final result of the color from here, and for the second pointer, I need the color to be very slightly different from the first color. So with this cursor over this brown color, if I press Ctrl plus C and select the second pointer, and now with the cursor over the white color, if I press Ctrl plus V, the brown color will get added here as well. But for this color, we'll increase the brightness from this slider like this to give it a slight orange look. And to make the texture look better, you can try to change the position of these pointers like this, and in this way, you can make your texture look more realistic than before. Let's also add this principal BSDF after the color ramp, and now to give it a 3D effect, we'll add the bump node. So press Shift plus A, go to vector and select the bump node, place it over here, then take this factor socket of the noise texture and connect it to the height, then take this normal socket and connect it to the normal of the principal BSDF. And here the bump node is applied to the texture. You can make this texture look better by changing the scale value in the y-axis from here. So if I reduce it, you will notice that at a value of somewhere near 0.2 or 0.1, you will get a realistic looking wood texture. And yes, one more thing, it's not compulsory to enter the same values that I am adding here. You can try to get different results by changing the scale values here or maybe the colors in the color ramp. You can also control the strength of the bump from here. So I think that we should keep it to somewhere near 0.5 and it looks better now. Since we are making the wood texture, let's increase the roughness in the principal BSDF to a very high value like 0.9 or 1, and now it looks perfect. And yes, this brings us to the end of this chapter. In this chapter, we learned about creating this fence in our scene with the help of all these geometry nodes. Then we even created a simple wood texture for this fence. In the next chapter, we'll be making the base of the landscape where the fence that we created will be placed. So our next chapter will be chapter number 33, geometry nodes, creating the base of landscape. So don't forget to subscribe to our channel, press that notification bell so that you can get timely updates about the upcoming chapters. Thank you for watching and we'll see you in the next one.